In a distant part of the galaxy, humanity had finally found its place among the stars. For decades, Earth's people worked hard to build alliances with other intelligent species. They wanted to prove that humans could be trusted and respected in this vast universe. But today, in a cold and sterile conference room aboard a neutral space station, everything was about to change. Daniel Carter stood at the center of the room, his face calm, but his mind racing. He was a tall man with sharp features and graying hair, someone who had spent most of his life negotiating peace deals for Earth's unified council. Across from him sat the Zorathian delegation, their sleek silver armor reflecting the dim light of the chamber. Their leader, Commander Vrax, was an imposing figure with glowing green eyes and a voice like thunder. To Daniel, he seemed more machine than being, though no one truly understood what lay beneath the Zorathians' metallic exteriors. The talks had been going on for weeks now, and tensions were high. The Zorathians accused humanity of spying on their territory, claiming that human ships had crossed into restricted zones without permission. Daniel knew some of these accusations weren't entirely false. A few rogue captains had indeed pushed boundaries while exploring uncharted regions of space. But those incidents were isolated, not part of any official mission. Still, Commander Vrax refused to believe it. "This is your final warning," Vrax said, his tone colder than the void outside the station. "If you cannot control your people, we will take matters into our own hands." Laura Bennett, Daniel's assistant, sat quietly beside him. She was younger, with short brown hair and a focused expression. Though she didn't speak much during the meetings, she listened carefully, taking notes on her tablet. Laura had always admired Daniel's ability to stay composed under pressure, but even she could see the cracks forming in his confidence. This wasn't just another negotiation, it felt like the end of something important. Daniel leaned forward slightly, choosing his words carefully. "Commander Vrax, I assure you that Earth has no intention of provoking conflict. We are here to find a solution, not to escalate tensions. If there have been misunderstandings, let us resolve them together." Vrax's glowing eyes narrowed. "Misunderstandings? Your kind has trespassed repeatedly. You act as if this galaxy belongs to you, just as you did on your own planet." His words hung heavy in the air, cutting through the tension like a blade. Laura glanced at Daniel, noticing how his jaw tightened ever so slightly. It was clear that Vrax wasn't interested in compromise. This meeting wasn't about finding common ground, it was about asserting dominance. And yet, Daniel tried again, unwilling to give up. "We value peace," Daniel said firmly, "but peace requires trust. Perhaps we can establish clearer borders or create joint patrols to ensure safety for everyone." Vrax rose from his seat. Abruptly, the movement startling both Daniel and Laura. "Enough," he growled. "Your words mean nothing. Actions speak louder, and yours tell us all we need to know." With that, he turned and strode toward the exit, followed closely by his entourage. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Daniel sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. Laura looked at him, concern etched on her face. "Do you think they'll attack?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But one thing is certain, they're done talking." As they left the conference chamber and made their way back to their quarters, neither of them spoke. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on them. Humanity had gambled on diplomacy, hoping to avoid another war after barely surviving the Krylon Wars years ago. Now, it seemed, that gamble might have failed. Later that evening, as Daniel stared out the window at the endless expanse of stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, beyond the neutral zone, the Zorathians were preparing. Ships would gather, weapons would be readied, and lives would hang in the balance. All because talks had failed, and humans had walked away. Laura joined him by the window, holding 2 cups of steaming tea. She handed one to Daniel before speaking. "What do we do now?" He took a sip, letting the warmth spread through him. "We prepare," he said simply, "and we hope that reason prevails before it's too late." But deep down, Daniel wasn't sure reason would be enough. Not this time. Back on Earth, the news of the failed negotiations spread like wildfire. Within hours, every news channel was buzzing with reports about the Zorathians' accusations and humanity's strained relations with one of the galaxy's most powerful races. People gathered in streets and public squares, watching massive screens display updates from the neutral space station where the talks had collapsed. Fear and anger rippled through the crowds as they listened to analysts speculate about what might happen next. General Harold Hank Miller sat in a dimly lit conference room at the United Earth Defense Headquarters. His broad shoulders sagged slightly under the weight of his uniform, but his piercing blue eyes remained sharp and focused. Around the table, other high-ranking officers exchanged worried glances. The air smelled faintly of coffee and stale air, a reminder of how long they'd been locked in this room discussing their options. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Miller began, his deep voice cutting through the murmurs, "we're facing a crisis. The Zorathians aren't just posturing, they're mobilizing. Our scouts have confirmed increased activity near their borders. If we don't act now, we risk being caught off guard." One of the officers, Colonel Patricia Rees, leaned forward. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her expression was grim. "Are you suggesting we strike first, sir? That would make us look like aggressors?" Miller shook his head firmly. "No, not yet. But we need to prepare for the worst. Every ship, every soldier, we need them ready. If war comes knocking, we can't afford to hesitate." Across the galaxy, aboard the starship Eclipse, Ethan Bennett stood in the cockpit, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. He was a pilot with years of experience, known for his quick reflexes and calm demeanor under pressure. Today, however, he felt restless. His sister Laura had sent him a message earlier, sharing her concerns about the breakdown in negotiations. Though she tried to sound optimistic, Ethan could hear the worry in her voice. "You okay, Bennett?" came a voice behind him. It was Captain Jason Cole, the commanding officer of the Eclipse. A tall man with a rugged face and a no-nonsense attitude, Cole had earned the respect of his crew through fairness and competence. Ethan turned to face him, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking about what my sister said. Things are getting tense out there." Cole nodded, stepping closer. "Tense is one way to put it. Command just sent word they want us to double patrols around our colonies. Looks like trouble's brewing." Ethan frowned. "You think the Zorathians will really attack?" "I don't know," Cole admitted. "But they didn't get to where they are by playing nice. We've got to be ready, whatever happens." Meanwhile, back on Earth, Daniel Carter found himself summoned to an emergency session of the Unified Council. The council chamber was packed with politicians, military leaders, and advisors, all clamoring for answers. Some argued for immediate retaliation against the Zorathians, while others urged caution. Daniel listened quietly, his mind racing as he weighed the arguments. When it was his turn to speak, he rose slowly, his presence commanding attention. "We must remember why we sought diplomacy in the first place," he said, his voice steady, despite the chaos around him. "War will only bring destruction, not just to us, but to countless innocent lives. Let's exhaust every peaceful option before resorting to violence." His words were met with mixed reactions. Some nodded in agreement, while others scoffed or rolled their eyes. One council member, Senator Richard Blake, stood up, his face red with frustration. "Peaceful options. Diplomacy has already failed, Carter. What more do you propose we do? Sit here and wait for the Zorathians to strike?" Daniel clenched his fists beneath the table, but kept his composure. "I'm not suggesting we do nothing, but rushing into war won't solve anything. We need time to regroup, to strengthen our alliances, and to find allies willing to mediate. Blake sneered. Time is a luxury we may not have. As the debate raged on, Laura watched from the sidelines, feeling increasingly uneasy. She knew Daniel was right, war would be catastrophic, but she also understood the growing sentiment among the council members. Fear often led to rash decisions, and fear was spreading fast. That evening, Laura decided to visit Rachel Morgan, a cybersecurity expert who worked closely with the council. Rachel lived in a small apartment in the heart of the city, its windows offering a stunning view of the skyline. When Laura arrived, Rachel greeted her with a warm smile, though her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. "What brings you here?" Rachel asked, handing Laura a cup of tea. "I needed to talk," Laura replied, sitting down on the couch. "Things are spiraling out of control. Everyone's so focused on preparing for war that no one's stopping to think about the consequences." Rachel sighed, running a hand through her shoulder-length blonde hair. "I know what you mean. I've been monitoring communications between Earth and the colonies. There's a lot of panic out there, and it's making people reckless." Laura hesitated before speaking again. Do you think we'll actually go to war?" Rachel looked at her, her expression serious. "If things keep going the way they are, yeah, I think it's inevitable. But let's hope cooler heads prevail before it's too late." As night fell over the planet, the sense of impending doom grew stronger. In homes, offices, and military bases across Earth, people braced themselves for what might come next. Children asked their parents if the stories they heard on the news were true. Soldiers polished their weapons, knowing they might soon be called to fight. And in the quiet moments, when the world seemed to pause, many wondered if humanity's fragile foothold in the stars was about to crumble. For Daniel, Laura, and everyone else involved, the days ahead promised to be long and difficult. Talks had failed, and humans had walked away. Now, the galaxy prepared for war, and none of them could say for sure whether peace would ever return. In the neutral zone between human and Zorathian territories, rumors began to spread like wildfire. Whispers of betrayal echoed through the corridors of Earth's unified council, fueled by anonymous tips and unverified reports. Someone inside the council was leaking classified information to the Zorathians. The thought sent a chill down the spines of everyone involved, from diplomats to soldiers. Rachel Morgan, a cybersecurity expert with sharp instincts and an even sharper mind, sat in her dimly lit office late at night. Her workspace was cluttered with screens displaying lines of code, security logs, and encrypted messages. She had been tasked with monitoring internal communications for any signs of foul play, but what she found shocked even her. Buried deep within the data streams were traces of outgoing transmissions messages sent to unknown recipients using sophisticated encryption methods. Whoever was behind this knew exactly how to cover their tracks. Rachel leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples as she tried to piece together the puzzle. She couldn't ignore the possibility that someone high up in the council was responsible. But who and why? The implications were staggering. If the Zorathians had access to Earth's strategies and defenses, humanity would be walking into a trap one they might not survive. The next morning, Rachel decided to take her findings directly to Daniel Carter. She trusted him more than anyone else in the council, knowing his integrity was beyond question. When she entered his office, he looked up from a stack of papers, his expression weary but attentive. "Daniel," Rachel said without preamble, closing the door behind her, "I think we have a problem." He gestured for her to sit. "What kind of problem?" She placed a small data chip on his desk. "This contains evidence of unauthorized transmissions leaving our network. Someone is feeding information to the Zorathians." Daniel's face darkened as he processed her words. "Are you sure about this?" "As sure as I can be," Rachel replied. "It's not easy to trace, but I managed to isolate patterns. These messages are going out regularly, and whoever's sending them knows how to hide their tracks." Daniel picked up the chip, turning it over in his fingers. If this gets out, it could destroy whatever trust remains between us and the Zorthians, not to mention the chaos it would cause here on Earth. Rachel nodded grimly. Exactly. Which is why we need to act fast. Do you have any ideas where to start looking? Daniel exhaled slowly, thinking. There are only a few people with access to sensitive information. We'll need to investigate carefully, discreetly. As they spoke, neither noticed the shadow moving outside the office window, a figure watching them closely, before slipping away unnoticed. Over the next few days, Rachel dove deeper into the investigation, narrowing down the list of suspects. One name kept appearing in connection with unusual activity. Senator Richard Blake. Known for his hawkish stance on military matters, Blake had long advocated for aggressive action against the Zorathians, while his rhetoric wasn't unusual. Rachel discovered something troubling. He had recently accessed files detailing Earth's defense plans, despite having no official reason to do so. Convinced she was onto something, Rachel arranged a private meeting with Blake under the guise of discussing cybersecurity protocols. They met in a secluded conference room, far from prying eyes. Blake greeted her with a polite smile, though his piercing gaze made her uneasy. "Ms. Morgan," he began, his voice smooth but firm. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Rachel forced a smile, keeping her tone casual. "Just routine checks, Senator. You've accessed some restricted files lately, and I wanted to ensure everything was secure." Blake raised an eyebrow. "Restricted files? I'm afraid you must be mistaken. My work doesn't require such access." She nodded, pretending to jot notes on her tablet. Of course, just covering all bases. But as she watched him, she noticed a flicker of unease in his eyes. It was subtle, but enough to confirm her suspicions. After the meeting ended, Rachel returned to her office, her heart pounding. She now had a lead, but confronting Blake outright would be dangerous. She needed concrete proof. That evening, Rachel worked tirelessly to gather more evidence. She traced Blake's digital footprints, uncovering links between his devices and the mysterious transmissions. As she compiled the data, she realized the stakes were higher than ever. If Blake was indeed the traitor, exposing him could turn the tide, but it could also put her life in danger. Late that night, Rachel prepared to leave her office, clutching the updated data chip tightly. Just as she reached the door, it burst open, startling her. Two men in dark uniforms stepped inside, their faces obscured by helmets. Before she could react, one of them grabbed her arm, twisting it painfully. "You shouldn't have dug so deep," the man growled, his voice low and menacing. Panic surged through Rachel, but she fought back with surprising strength, kicking and struggling to break free. In the chaos, she managed to slip the data chip into her pocket unnoticed. The attackers underestimated her determination, and after a fierce struggle, she broke away. Bolting down the hallway, her escape was narrow, adrenaline propelling her forward as alarms blared in the distance. Reaching a service exit, she stumbled into the cool night air, her chest heaving. She knew she couldn't go home, not yet. Her only hope now was to reach Ethan Bennett aboard the Eclipse. He was her brother, yes, but more importantly, he was part of the fleet that could protect her and the truth she carried. As Rachel disappeared into the shadows, the galaxy teetered on the brink of disaster. Betrayal loomed large, threatening to unravel humanity's fragile unity, and somewhere in the darkness, forces conspired to silence those who dared to seek the truth. The tension in space was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. Near the edge of human territory, Captain Jason Cole led a routine patrol aboard the starship Elysium. The mission was simple: monitor activity along the border and ensure no unauthorized ships entered human space. For weeks, everything had been quiet, almost too quiet. But today, something felt different. Ethan Bennett sat in the cockpit of his fighter, part of a small squadron accompanying the Elysium. His hands rested lightly on the controls as he scanned the void ahead. The silence weighed heavily on him, broken only by the occasional crackle of radio chatter. He glanced at the other pilots in his team, each focused on their instruments. They were good people, loyal and brave, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was coming. Suddenly, the sensors lit up with an alert. A Zorathian reconnaissance vessel had appeared on the edge of their scanners, moving cautiously but deliberately toward human territory. It was small, sleek, and unmistakably hostile. Ethan's heart raced as he heard Captain Cole's voiceover. "The comms, all units, prepare for contact," Cole ordered, his tone calm but firm. "Do not engage unless provoked." Ethan tightened his grip on the controls, his mind racing. This was the moment they'd all feared. The Zorathians weren't just watching anymore. They were testing the waters. As the squadron moved closer, Ethan activated his communication system, attempting to establish contact. "This is Pilot Ethan Bennett of the United Earth Fleet," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "You are entering restricted space. Please state your intentions." There was no response. The Zorathian ship continued its approach, ignoring the warning completely. Ethan exchanged a glance with his wingman, Sarah Lewis, who hovered nearby in her own fighter. She gave him a quick nod, signaling readiness. "Repeat, this is Pilot Ethan Bennett." Ethan tried again. "Cease your advance, or we will take defensive action." Still, nothing. The silence was deafening, stretching out until it became unbearable. Then, without warning, the Zorathian ship fired. Bright beams of energy streaked through space, narrowly missing Ethan's fighter. Instinct took over as he banked hard to the left, dodging the attack while returning fire. The skirmish erupted quickly, chaos replacing order. Ethan's squadron maneuvered skillfully, working together to counter the Zorathian assault. Despite their smaller numbers, the humans fought fiercely, determined to hold their ground. Explosions lit up the darkness as shots connected, illuminating the cold emptiness of space. Back on the Elysium, Captain Cole monitored the battle from the bridge. His jaw was set, eyes locked on the screens displaying the conflict. "Target their engines," he commanded. "We need to disable them, not destroy them." The crew worked frantically, relaying orders and adjusting weapons systems. The Elysium joined the fight, unleashing a barrage of firepower that forced the Zorathian ship to retreat slightly. But the enemy wasn't giving up easily. Reinforcements arrived, a second Zorathian vessel, emerging from behind an asteroid field, catching the humans off guard. Ethan cursed under his breath as alarms blared in his cockpit. Outnumbered and outgunned, the situation grew dire. One of his teammates, Alex Carter, took a direct hit, his fighter spiraling out of control before exploding in a burst of light. Ethan clenched his teeth, grief mixing with anger. He couldn't afford to lose focus, not now. "Fall back to the Elysium," Cole shouted over the comms. "Regroup and reassess." Reluctantly, Ethan obeyed, pulling away from the fight alongside the remaining members of his squadron. The Zorathians pursued briefly, but eventually broke off, retreating into the depths of space. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating, as the survivors docked with the Elysium. Ethan climbed out of his fighter, his legs trembling. The loss of Alex hit him hard, a reminder of the cost of war. Around him, the crew moved somberly, tending to damaged ships and injured personnel. Captain Cole approached, his expression grim. "We did what we could," Cole said, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "But this changes everything." Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. They attacked without provocation. There's no denying it. Now they're looking for a fight. News of the skirmish reached Earth within hours, spreading panic across the planet. General Hank Miller stood in the Defense Council chamber, addressing a room filled with anxious faces. "The Zorathians have made their intentions clear," he declared, his voice echoing through the tense atmosphere. "This was no accident. They've declared war." The council erupted into arguments, voices rising in anger and fear. Some called for immediate retaliation, while others urged caution, fearing humanity wasn't ready for another galactic conflict. Daniel Carter watched silently, his face pale. He had warned against rushing into war, but now it seemed inevitable. Laura Bennett sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly together. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Daniel sighed, shaking his head. "Now, we prepare for the worst." Across the galaxy, soldiers and civilians alike braced themselves for what was to come. Families gathered around news broadcasts, listening to reports of the first clash. Children cried, unsure why their parents looked so scared. In military bases, troops polished their weapons and reviewed battle plans, knowing they might soon be called to fight. For Ethan, the reality of war sank in as he stared out a viewport on the Elysium. Beyond the glass, the stars twinkled innocently, oblivious to the turmoil unfolding below. He thought of Laura, of Rachel, of everyone back on Earth, counting on them to protect their future. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier than ever before. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Talks had failed, and humanity had walked away. Now, the stage was set for a war that could reshape the stars, and no one knew how far the flames would spread. The first major battle unfolded at Proxima Centauri, a system that housed one of humanity's largest and most vital shipyards. The sprawling facility floated in orbit around a red dwarf star, its metallic structures gleaming faintly in the dim light. This was the heart of human space production, where new ships were built and old ones repaired. If the Zorothians captured it, humanity's ability to fight would be crippled. Admiral Samantha Grant stood on the bridge of the Invincible, her flagship, surveying the battlefield through the massive viewport. She was a tall woman with sharp features and piercing gray eyes, known for her strategic brilliance and unyielding determination. Around her, officers worked tirelessly, relaying updates and coordinating movements. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. "Status report," Admiral Grant barked, voice cutting through the hum of activity. Lieutenant Mark Evans, a young officer stationed at the tactical console, glanced up. "Zorthian fleet approaching from the North Quadrant. Estimated time to engagement, 15 minutes. Our forces are in position." Grant nodded, her mind racing as she reviewed the strategy. The human fleet was outnumbered, but had one advantage. They knew the terrain. Proxima Centauri was littered with asteroids and debris fields, perfect for ambushes and hit-and-run tactics. Ethan Bennett and his squadron had been assigned to patrol these areas, ready to strike when the opportunity arose. As the Zorothian ships entered the system, their sleek designs glinted menacingly in the starlight. They moved in tight formations, their weapons primed and shields active. It was clear they intended to overwhelm the humans quickly, crushing any resistance before it could take root. Ethan sat in the cockpit of his fighter, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had painted a small symbol on the side of his ship, a reminder of Alex Carter, his fallen teammate. Today, he fought not just for survival, but for justice. Beside him, Sarah Lewis checked her instruments, her expression calm, despite the chaos ahead. "All units, hold your positions." Admiral Grant's voice crackled over the comms. "Wait for my signal." The Zorthians opened fire first, their energy beams slicing through space like knives. The human fleet responded immediately, launching a barrage of missiles and laser blasts. Explosions erupted across the battlefield, lighting up the darkness with bursts of fiery brilliance. Ships darted and weaved, dodging attacks while returning fire. Ethan's squadron sprang into action, using the asteroid field to their advantage. They launched surprise attacks on the edges of the Zorothian formation, targeting weaker ships and creating confusion. Ethan's fighters zipped between rocks, firing precise shots that disabled enemy engines. Each successful hit boosted his confidence, reminding him why he loved flying, but the Zorathians adapted quickly. Recognizing the threat posed by Ethan's team, they sent several fighters to chase them down. Sarah spotted the incoming ships and warned Ethan over the comms. "They're on to us. Fall back." Ethan gritted his teeth, pulling his fighter into a tight turn. "Not yet. Keep them busy. I've got an idea." He led the pursuing Zorathians deeper into the asteroid field, luring them closer to a cluster of large rocks. At the last second, he triggered a series of pre-placed mines hidden among the debris. The resulting explosions engulfed the enemy fighters, sending shards of metal spinning into space. Ethan grinned triumphantly as he rejoined his squadron. Meanwhile, Admiral Grant directed the main fleet with precision. Her plan relied on splitting the Zorathian forces, forcing them to divide their attention. Using decoys and feints, she drew part of the enemy fleet away from the shipyard, leaving the rest vulnerable to concentrated attacks. The humans capitalized on this opening, unleashing everything they had. 4 hours. The battle raged on, neither side willing to yield. The Zorathians fought with relentless efficiency, their technology superior, but their numbers stretched thin. The humans, though outmatched in firepower, compensated with creativity and teamwork. Every pilot, every gunner, gave their all, knowing the fate of their species depended on their success. Back on Earth, news of the battle reached the Unified Council. Daniel Carter listened intently as reports streamed in, detailing the fierce struggle at Proxima Centauri. Though the outcome remained uncertain, early signs suggested the humans were holding their ground. Laura sat beside him, gripping his hand tightly. "They're doing it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Against all odds, they're fighting back." Daniel nodded, pride swelling in his chest. He had doubted whether humanity was ready for war, but now he saw their resilience firsthand. These soldiers weren't just defending their homes, they were proving that humanity wouldn't back down, no matter the cost. By the time the dust settled, the human fleet had managed to repel the Zorathian assault. The enemy retreated, leaving behind damaged ships and shattered plans. Cheers erupted aboard the Invincible and other surviving vessels as crews celebrated their hard-fought victory. But Admiral Grant remained somber, knowing this was only the beginning. "We've won today," she said, addressing her crew. "But don't mistake this for the end. The Zorathians will return, stronger and angrier. We need to prepare for what comes next." Ethan stared out at the wreckage drifting in space, his heart heavy, despite the wind. He thought of Alex and the others who hadn't made it. This victory had come at a price, one he hoped wouldn't be forgotten. As the galaxy processed the events at Proxima Centauri, a newfound sense of unity emerged among humanity's factions. People rallied together, donating resources and volunteering for service. Even those who had once doubted the Council's leadership now supported the war effort, driven by a shared determination to protect their future. For Ethan, Laura, and everyone else involved, the road ahead was long and uncertain. The battle had turned the tide slightly in humanity's favor, but the war was far from over. Talks had failed, and the galaxy prepared for more conflict. Yet amid the destruction and loss, a spark of hope remained, a belief that humanity could endure, even in the face of overwhelming odds.